I'm Hannah Brakke. I'm the product manager for Sample Manager here at LabKey. I'm going to be giving you a quick overview of what Sample Manager is if you haven't heard about it. Talk about what we've been doing this year. This is our newest product at LabKey, and we've been making lots of progress. And then what we plan to do next year and sort of beyond that as well. So Sample Manager is a cloud-based sample management tool that provides end-to-end sample tracking. And our workflow and assay features really allow for capturing sample processing workflows and associated assay data with those. It really is a unified application for samples, data, and their storage location, so where they might be in the lab at any given time. And when we started creating Sample Manager about 3 years ago, we knew we wanted to allow the application to be flexible for creating data structures that map the exact needs of the terminology and the science that's happening in your lab, while still maintaining that data integrity component that LabKey is known for and most of us all know and love. And following that, being in the lab myself for a long time before I came to this, and seeing how hard it was for people to use external tools, we really wanted to make something that was intuitive for teams to use, as well as really, really easy to use and pick up. So people would be excited about using them, and then hopefully maximize that efficiency by having that data integrity and being able to use it in their day-to-day workflow. And finally, really focusing on the collaboration of teams. You know, science isn't happening in a vacuum. So we want to make sure that we're capturing that collaborative nature, trying to remove your teams from emails and shared spreadsheets and things like that, and really give them a place to manage their work. As I mentioned before, this was really built by scientists, and not just me. We have a product advisory council of scientists that help us determine what is the most useful thing for them, and really sort of cross disciplines as well. And so this application was built by scientists for scientists, and we really want your feedback on how to be able to use Sample Manager in your lab. So we're going to start out with a poll. I'd like to know from the folks here, what area of sample management do you most need a tool for? And so hopefully you see that poll pop up. We'll give you a few minutes to answer. I'm going to start talking about it, and then we're going to actually show these results a little bit more live than they had been yesterday, just so I can speak to those needs that you guys are looking for. As you're thinking about that and answering, Sample Manager has 4 main feature areas. And of course, you know, Sample Manager in the name, we're managing sample tracking. So you are able to capture the full chain of custody and history of anything that's happened to that sample within the system very easily. We have metadata that allows you to define sample types and sources that is customizable. So when I show you my demo later today, when you hear from our speakers, know that we've all customized and configured the data to map what we call things in the lab. And then you can also easily navigate sample lineage and inventory. So one of the components is that we want to make sure that your samples exist in the system, but also have context around them. So where did this sample come from? Was it from a mouse or a patient, or did you receive it from a lab or another collaborator? And then what has happened to that sample? Have you derived other sample types from it, or created a bunch of aliquots and used those? And so we present this to you in a variety of different ways. And then, of course, freezer management, being able to track that storage of samples within the lab. All the things that you would expect out of a freezer management tool. You can match the freezers and the storage options in your lab with the digital options that we provide. It's very flexible, customizable there. And then also sort of tracking that movement of samples, both in and out of storage, but within storage as well. So if you end up moving them from one freezer to another, we're tracking, auditing, and displaying that information. And then of course, tracking the volume and freeze thaw history. So as you are decrementing that sample, we are tracking those amounts for you. And then two other components of Sample Manager that are really sort of beyond a traditional freezer management tool is the workflow management, where you're able to map lab processes and use those templates to standardize work in the lab. And so what we often see people do is creating workflow templates that map to standardized SOPs or to processes that they're doing every day in the lab, like shipping or receiving or uploading assay data. You can assign and comment and upload files to tasks. So it's really meant to be this kind of live space for you to be able to assign work to different people and collaborate with teams, and then be able to comment back and forth on what might be going on and sharing files as needed as well. And then really giving you that lab-wide view of ongoing work that's happening. So you get a sense of what you need to do in any given day, but you can also see what the team's doing and sort of help manage their workflows. And then finally, assay data capture. So really providing this place for you to aggregate all of your experimental assay data for samples in one system. We link those directly to the samples, so you see that at a lot of different levels. You can import really any type of assay data. So it's very agnostic. We're looking for sort of tabular formats that would fit into sort of a standard spreadsheet, and then displaying that data as well. And then you can sort of track that status and progress of ongoing experiments with linking the assay data capture that you need to our workflow management tool. So I think that's probably enough time to show what our poll results are. So maybe we'll end here and display this. There we go. Okay. And so, yeah, it looks like we've got a pretty mixed response on this. I'm not surprised, frankly, from people that we talk to, the groups that we have today. Sample registration obviously is a very big component, but it's only one component of how samples are dealt with in the lab. So seeing then freezer management is really exciting because that's where we spent a lot of our effort in this year. Workflow management and assay data integration. It's great to see this because these are the parts to me that kind of make Sample Manager stand out among other products. And then of course, data centralization. If you knew nothing about LabKey before you came to this conference, we're all about data centralization. So exciting to see that too. Okay, so there's also some key benefits of Sample Manager in a system like this. And as I mentioned before, this concept of data integrity and being able to uniquely register your samples and sources. And we allow you to do this in a variety of ways. You can decide how you want to name things and have users enter what those names are, or you can create a naming pattern that then the system will create unique names for you. So there's never going to be this confusion of, oh, what's sample A? And you also have sample A. Where do we need to resolve that? Validating data entry as well. So this is very common in Sample Manager. You can both sort of create the field types that you want and ensure that when you say, please enter the draw date, you're getting a date and not anything else, as well as being able to validate ranges of values that are coming in, and imposing sort of structure on text fields as well. And then of course, that full sample chain of custody. So you'll be able to see what has happened with a sample in our timeline view throughout its life within the application. And that really makes for easy auditing, easy troubleshooting, easy reporting, and then structured customizable data fields. So what I'm going to show you later on, what other folks are going to talk about, again, we've allowed for this structure, but also customization that sort of gives your lab what you need. Laboratory efficiency. So we allow for sample registration to happen in a lot of different ways within the application. First and foremost, you can kind of take a file of samples that you have, maybe in Excel or a spreadsheet or an export from another system. If that's in the right format, you can upload that. We also have built-in registration when you are wanting to create samples within the application. So once maybe your implementation and migration is done, you can start using it directly in there. You can stop using the spreadsheets. You can also quickly view that sample context and lineage, as well as all of the samples that have been derived from a given source. And so that kind of allows you to quickly make judgment calls on your samples while you're in the lab. Understanding what work needs to be done and when with our workflow tool. So we will provide you with sort of the list of items that you've been tasked with with their priority and due dates. And that allows you to sort of know what you need to do when you come in for the day. And then hopefully you'll hear from our users later on. This is really meant to be a zero stress implementation tool. So we support you along the way, but we've also provided this great intuitive interface that hopefully allows people to get up and running very quickly. And finally, collaboration. So managing all of your sample work in a single multi-user application. So a quick side note, when I first started managing samples for my CAR T-cell immunotherapy trials that I was part of, we were using Excel, which quickly became very hard as soon as two of us needed to open the same Excel file. Then we moved to Google Spreadsheets, which was not only not IT's favorite way of tracking our samples, but it also turned out to be a complete mess. So having all of your sample work in one place where multiple people can be working in the lab at the same time was really important to us. Being able to assign tasks and jobs to team members, again, sort of that collaborative nature where I can set the work that needs to be done for my team in a week, and I can start delegating as I need to, or reassigning if somebody is out. I can also create shared sample pick lists for transparency. So, I've been tasked with running an experiment on these 50 samples. Let me confirm with my QC person or my PI that those are indeed the samples that they want to use, and being able to share that list within the application without having to export and do those things. Again, making it really easy. And then really sort of providing that framework for downstream analysis. So the more standardized and the more structured your data is, as flexible as the system is, we do want it to be structured. So if you want to make reports and analyses downstream, you really have that option, and it becomes very easy to work with other teams. So this year, again, really excited to see that most of you are interested in freezer management, because that's what we spent a lot of last year and a good chunk of this year really doing. After we launched, we realized that freezer management was a core component that we wanted to include in the product. And for us, freezer management really is this sample-centric freezer management tool, which allows groups to map their physical storage to digital storage. And when I say sample-centric, it's really this concept that samples don't have to solely exist in a system inside a freezer, right? So you can register them maybe before they arrive to help with efficiency in sample receipt, and then put them in the freezer or storage when you're ready. When they are removed from storage, you still have that sample. You don't have to go traipsing through some deep dive audit log to figure out what that sample is and what the data is associated with it. And so kind of going off the three themes that we have, you can track that sample movement in and out of storage, check in, check out events as it's moving between storage units as well, where we'll track all of that. We auto calculate the remaining sample amount. So instead of having to do the math on the fly to say, well, I had 1 mil of this sample and I used 100 microliters, we're sort of doing that math for you, again, taking that extra step and guesswork out of it. And then allowing that freeze thaw automatic increment as well. In terms of efficiency, displaying box views as you see here to make that storage intuitive. So if you're lucky enough to be able to be looking at a screen as you're in the freezer, you can very quickly, easily map what's in your box with what's being displayed on the screen. And then easily being able to add samples to storage in bulk. So we have a mechanism, we have actually a few mechanisms to do this, where you can register them all at once, like via file, again, in that like migration or implementation case. But then you can also go into a certain box and say, okay, I've got these 100 spots filled, let me quickly add those. And so hopefully we'll be able to touch on that in the demo later as well. Being able to view that remaining freezer capacity at a glance. And so that's something that we're kind of displaying on every screen. We've gotten a lot of feedback on this, and we want to continue to improve on that as well to allow folks to be able to utilize that even more. Quickly getting a list of checkout samples. So on our dashboard of freezer management, we'll show you what's checked out. And so you can start looking through and say, wow, there's a sample that's been checked out for a month. Is that really checked out? Does it need to be discarded? Does somebody forget to put it back in the freezer? Sort of making those quick judgments and working with your team. And then being able to see who last touched that sample and why. So we have a lot of comments when you're moving samples in and out of the out of storage. And so you'll be able to kind of see exactly what happened there. We've also focused on barcodes this year and being able to create them with sort of application-wide unique barcodes with the ability to search and act on those samples via scanning. So as we started to hear back from our users and from prospects, people are really moving towards barcodes and scanning, which is really exciting to see. So you can register your samples within the system with unique generated barcodes by Sample Manager. You can also sort of quickly scan multiple samples at once and perform actions on them. And that's kind of what that screen is showing you here, that you can pull up this Find Samples modal, scan through your wedge scanner, scan through a plate reader or a box scanner, and move those barcodes in, and then be able to say, okay, yeah, this whole bunch of samples is being checked out or being checked in, being able to perform those types of actions. And then we also have a native bartender integration that would allow you to encode those barcodes that you kind of see on the screen here just as numbers into a barcode that can be scanned when you print your labels. And then again, sort of being able to add those scanned samples to shared pick lists or workflow jobs. So the work that you're doing in the lab is being shared with other people or delegated to other people in some cases as well. Another focus that we've had this year and will be out later in this year is this concept of sample status, and really being able to assign samples a laboratory specific label with admin defined controls imposed by the application. So that's a long way of saying essentially you can mark your sample as received, consumed, locked. Hey, my PI said don't use this. And say when you tag your samples with this, we also sort of restrict. So if this is something that is locked, then we're not going to allow you to do much in the system with this, but it's still going to be there and viewable. It's just sort of confined by the status. And so being able to see those sample statuses application wide, so you kind of get this idea here in the screenshot that we have, to help teams build that common sample status vocabulary and expectation. Also being able to quickly view the samples by status in dashboards and also grids, filtering, sorting, that kind of thing, and enabling and disabling those actions taken on samples by assigning the right sample status. And this all really just removes the guesswork on samples that might be awaiting QC results or shipment status or more things using that sample status indicator. We also really focused on integration with LabKey study. And most of you, I think, have probably heard a lot about study now, or since we're on day 3 of the conference. And our goal here is really to integrate samples with that longitudinal study data that's being captured within LabKey study, and be able to sort of expand on all of this with customizable reporting and grid views and all the great things that study comes with. And really sort of the idea here is to try and reduce errors and data redundancy by capturing all of the data in the same system, right? So making your life and your team's life easier by not having to send these over or ETL them, as we talked about on Tuesday, or things like that, really having them all in one place. Also being able to set up sort of an automatic link to study. So we've enabled this option as well. So for any blood sample that I get in, all of those samples might be linked to my blood study sample or something like that, to sort of reduce any steps that your team might have to take. And then again, sort of centralizing that data capture to commit to a single source of truth. You can also link the laboratory and study team's data for that holistic view of the study. So instead of your clinical data and your lab data being kind of siloed and in a vacuum from each other and need to be resolved, like all of this again is in one place. And then of course, as you would imagine, you also then have the ability to really control access to ensure data security kind of at every level. And you heard this a little bit from Mike McCoss yesterday. We also have started on work with integrating with Panorama and really providing those links between sample data and the targeted mass spec results in Panorama and Sample Manager. And we've really just kind of scratched the surface on this one. This is very much a work in progress, but the idea here is the exact same with LabKey study, right? Being able to reduce those errors and data redundancy by keeping all of the data in one system is really our primary goal. And then also being able to easily export sample information for use in instrument software and Skyline. So I've got a list of samples that I might want to run one day. I would be able to export that, get additional information that I want to encode in that instrument software or Skyline. Being able to quickly understand if samples have associated Skyline files. So that's kind of what you're seeing here in this screen. And also being able to sort of gain that further context on mass spec results by viewing sample information with your analysis. And then, so for next year, we've got a lot of big plans. I'm really, really excited about it. We're going in kind of a few different directions here. And the goal, our primary goal really is to strengthen Sample Manager and continue to make this the most intuitive, most easy to use application for sample and freezer management out there. Also including enhancing some of our features, such as adding quality control processes to sample and assay data, as well as continuing to improve on that reporting to give the greatest value for people working in the lab. Bridging Sample Manager to a LabKey LIMS, and so really sort of start to build on our task-based workflow and provide more automation around that, again, gaining efficiency for teams in the lab, and being able to track experimental plates and manage those within the system as well. We also want to continue our integration with LabKey studies. So what we did this year is only kind of the tip of the iceberg. We want to continue that integration to make it as seamless as possible, being able to provide clinical data views within Sample Manager and enforcing the subjects that are coming from the clinical data in Sample Manager as well. And then lastly, again, sort of that same thing, wanting to integrate with Panorama, wanting to provide groups using Panorama with a way to continually sort of centralize their data, having more visibility of Skyline data within Sample Manager application, and promoting really good experimental design by being able to do like blocking and other things from sample lists. So overall, we talked a lot about Sample Manager, and then I kind of went into like all these other integrations that we want to do. And we do have a vision for this product. And our goal really is to have Sample Manager be that starting point for labs. And everybody who is receiving stuff in the lab needs a tool like Sample Manager. If you've got a freezer, you probably need a tool like Sample Manager. And so we wanted to have this be the starting point for groups to be able to start their data management journey and really then extend upon it. So as we start to build out this LabKey LIMS that would allow for those advanced QC processes and that automation of workflows, customizable reporting, things like that, bridging that gap, we would imagine as some groups really want to use samples, and then as they may sort of expand and realize they want more of a full-blown LIMS, they would be able to grow with us within this interface. Continuing our support with LabKey Study and being able to manage that study data, continuing to refine those access controls and really have that centralized clinical and research data. And then biologics, which you heard a lot about yesterday. Some of you might be asking, like, what you showed today is a lot of what biologics has, and that's really intentional, right? We want you to be able to use the tools that Sample Manager has and then expand on them if you are doing large molecule biologics development. So that entity management Bernie talked about, having an ELN that sort of tracks with that data, and then of course that lab processes modeling that he's going to be working on this year and next year. So I've got one more poll for you today. I'm very interested in hearing what your biggest challenges have been in adopting a new sample management system, or what you might perceive your biggest challenges to be in that adoption as well. And so I'll give you a couple seconds here. And I'm just going to look at the Q&A while people are answering. So somebody mentioned that they've got a lot of samples, and are there practical performance limits or numbers generally in the freezers? And so far the answer is no, we haven't hit this. We do a lot of performance testing on our own, but we also like to interact with our clients and understand the types of data and that they have and the amount of data that they have. So we are able to support you in that. Sharing samples and doing work across labs. So how does that work with Sample Manager? And so there are a few different ways to do this. And we actually have some things going to be built out next year to help support this even more. But typically that shared work, you can each have your own version of Sample Manager. The import and export then will work very seamlessly. Or you can have something a little bit more large scale and go for the higher version of Sample Manager, where you might be able to have multiple sample managers on the same instance. I think we'll hear from some groups about that today. And I still see some people answering, so I'll do one more question before we move on. And then, is LabKey Study something different from the study folder type? And no, it's not. So right now, LabKey Server, as you heard about on Tuesday, has a study module or that study folder that Brent is talking about, and LabKey Study is just our short way of describing that functionality within the server. Okay, I think we'll end the poll and kind of look at the results here. So again, to kind of remind folks of what these biggest challenges have been. And I like to see this because I've done this before. I help people sort of daily with these challenges, and it's great to hear what your perception of this as well. And so, the lack of tools, the implementation and migration is too intense. 100% agree with you on that. Typically this becomes very challenging. And then kind of even split with the rest of these. And so what I want to talk about is how Sample Manager might be able to help with some of this for you. And if you're struggling from that lack of appropriate tools, remember that Sample Manager is designed to be science agnostic, which allows for lots of different teams and disciplines to use it. It also is really meant to grow with your lab, as sort of the slide a couple slides ago had demonstrated, helping you manage more complex LIMS processes or manage clinical trial data as you need it and as your group needs it, as well as sort of capturing that large molecule biologics entities with our other product, LabKey Biologics. And if implementation seems too insurmountable, which again, I totally understand, Sample Manager is a cloud-first option. And so this really is removing the need for any in-house IT support. And so that's like one implementation barrier gone. We also provide lots of mechanisms to quickly get samples migrated with our standard template, which again, people have used with coming from other tools or coming from Excel or are sort of curating on their own. And you can also sort of use those existing spreadsheet formats to create the data structures themselves. So not only import, but sort of have us take a guess at what those structures should look like. And if resistance to change is something that you're encountering, which is in there quite a bit, head back and listen to Gaurav's talk and the following panel from Monday's discussion, because I think they had some really good points there. Starting small, being able to tackle bits at a time. And I'm going to kind of speed up here because I know I'm over time. But really, we have designed Sample Manager to be easy to use. It was designed by scientists for scientists. And so hopefully that helps provide that necessary activation energy that you need to get teams on board. And when training is going to feel like a chore, again, it's meant to be intuitive, meant to be easy to use. But when all of that fails, if you are struggling with something, we have lots of documentation. We also provide on-demand training as needed as part of the subscription. We want you to be successful. And then of course, there's not a lot you could do about cost or lack of funding, but ultimately we are trying to provide a lot of different pricing options for different labs as well. Okay, so I will continue to answer some of these questions. Since we're over, I'm going to be as quick as I can, and then we'll try and get back to you as well if we don't get to all of them. So somebody is mentioning that LIMS vendors are limiting the number of custom fields or charge extra for them. Sample Manager does not limit the number of fields on your data that you're allowed, right? So it's really up to you on how crazy you want to be. If you really want a sample type with 200 fields, like have at it. It wouldn't be maybe my recommendation as like somebody who managed data in a lab for a while, but that's definitely sort of an option for you, and we're not increasing costs based on that as well. LabKey, somebody's asking about migration services, and yes, we do offer data migration services. If people are moving from more standard systems to LabKey, we have a good sense of what those data structures are. We continue to learn, and every lab is different, but we do offer those services as well for groups that want to use them. And how does Sample Manager handle shipping? So tracking samples leaving the lab at one time and returning. So that is really sort of the primary focus of our workflow management tool, and coupled with sample status. And so yes, we can handle shipping and those pick lists or manifests, either through sort of the pick list feature, or really through workflow, in my opinion, is probably the best thing, because shipping isn't just one thing, right? You're pulling the samples, you're getting the list, you're preparing all of the labels and sending that out. And so that would really fit in that workflow management tool. Okay, I think we're gonna stop here since we're a little bit over.